Hey everyone, it's Terence Branley, and welcome back to another episode of the Grow IT podcast. And I'm lucky. I have John Vegas, who is the CEO and founder of Vegas Consulting Group, his last name. And we are going to talk about all things that are pertinent to all of us probably need, but especially executives who are in need of some coaching and obviously consulting. But I'm excited to talk to you and pick your brain a little bit here, John. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Terence. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to this
Yeah.
conversation.
All right. So give us a quick background. Tell us a little about your journey and to how you're to get where you're at now in terms of Vegas consulting.
Yeah, my journey is I've always been passionate about strategy and leadership. And so, coming out of college, I worked for a great organization and I was in their training program and learned a lot about the business, but just always had this fascination of understanding like what made great leaders great. And in particular, I grew up in the retail business. So you could have two stores in a 3 mile radius with vastly different outcomes. And inherently, what I learned was it was often the consequence or the impact of the leader. And so I was on this journey to really figure out, what is it that made great leaders great, and what is it that they did that inspired, influenced, and wanted to get other people to follow them. And so as a result, I was fortunate enough to lead a variety of different businesses, including a business in Latin America, but also to have the opportunity to have work in HR and organizational development. So always with the blend of strategy, how do you get great outcomes and deliver great results in businesses. And I've been on this journey now as a consultant for the last 5 years. I started Vegas Consulting Group because having worked for several Fortune 500 companies, learned a lot about business and about how the world works. And I always thought that that information and experience could be highly applicable to small, mid-sized businesses. So today, Vegas Consulting Group provides executive coaching or organizational leadership support to Fortune 500 companies, but also companies as small as $10 million companies, and trying to help them figure out what are the keys to their strategy and their success.
That's interesting. Okay, and especially because executives are typically on the let's call it Fortune 500 or enterprise level, and to go from that group of folks down to the SMBs is two completely different segments.
In many ways, it is. I mean, yes, it's primarily an issue of scale. I think you work in big organizations, right? You're talking about billion-dollar organizations. They're a lot larger as it relates to people, but when you break it down, it really comes down to the same components, right? As a leader, what's the strategy for your business? Like, how do you achieve the desired outcomes? How do you build a great team? How do you get people to want to follow you? How do you get people to give you their discretionary energy to really in support of both you as a leader, but also of the organization? So it's one of those things where I call it the paradoxical theory of change. Yes, they're incredibly different, but they're also very similar in many ways as well.
Well, maybe if you can talk a little bit about some of the specific problems, right? And they're every prospect and every client has their own set of challenges or issues, or maybe it's just a desired outcome they're looking to get to. But what challenges are you helping them solve? And obviously, for different segments of the market, probably differ, and every situation is different. But what are some of the problems that you're helping them solve?
Yeah, I'll break it into two components. One is at the enterprise level, right, when I'm consulting for organizations, and then the coaching practice is a little bit different because it's a different component. It's more one-to-one than really thinking about driving change at scale at the enterprise level. From a consulting standpoint, it's largely helping organizations think about transformation or meaningful change. And so I've worked in the chemical industry, retail, consumer packaged goods, energy space, so a variety of different spaces. And there it's largely helping leaders think about how they can implement meaningful change. And I'll give you a good example of that. There's a well-respected Fortune 500 company that really wanted to transform its sales organization and wanted to go from primarily a relationship-driven business, right, where people have known each other for really long times and they introduce products and talk about pricing, to really becoming more general managers of the business. So for themselves internally providing consultative support to their clients and customers. And that shift's pretty meaningful because if you've been somewhere for 30 years and you're exceptionally good at building relationships and understanding how to support your customers, but you're largely giving either the customers what they want or executing what the organization wants, you're not necessarily bringing that added value of being a general manager, if you will, or bringing insights from a digital standpoint or using technology to help the customers make better decisions. So it's a pretty sizable transformation. And so in that particular case, partnered with the client, really understood what the change was and how meaningful it was to the organization on a strategy level. But then how do you sell it to internally to the sales organization? And as a result, we built new sales competencies for them. We helped them think about the shift, what the implications were from a compensation standpoint, and how they could go about doing it in a more meaningful way for the client. And so that's a good example of large scale change at an enterprise level for an organization. That's just one example, but we help clients with other things around, how do you build a better performance management system? How do you communicate a return to work is a good example, right? Where you have a lot of companies where their employees are remote, and just saying to folks, hey, you need to come back to work, it might have worked 20, 30 years ago, but it just doesn't work in today's environment. So crafting the right approach and communication strategy to be able to do that. So really anything that has to do with organizational performance are areas that we tend to specialize in and provide support for.
What do you have any? And again, you kind of just touched on one there, which
Yeah.
I guess in terms of like success stories, right? And are there ones that come to mind to where, and again, success has its own label, right? In terms of what a client views as success, with that's really what the most important thing is. And do you have examples where you've helped them, whether it be on the executive level or on the management consulting level? Some success stories that stand out, maybe.
Yeah, I'll give you one quickly on the consulting side, and then let's talk about coaching because it's more intimate, more one-to-one. On the consulting side, as organizations are trying to drive meaningful change, one of the things we start with, like, what's the end in mind? What's the goal? Like, do you have KPIs or ways of measuring your progress or success? And then we work our way backwards, right? So, clearly, if you want to achieve a certain outcome and there's a financial target or metric, like how meaningful or different is the shift or change? And then what are the behaviors that are required or necessary? One of the things that is uniquely valuable and important is understanding the current state of the organization, right? I mean, most people do what they do because it's worked for them or it's been successful. I mean, no one comes to work, trying to do work that's frankly not going to measure up to what the organization wants or needs. So understanding that human component often becomes a critical part. And so one of the things that we do is kind of get voice of internal customer, which is gather data to figure out exactly what's at the root of the resistance to change. And then working with the organization to figure out how do we position it in a more meaningful way, but also create internal changes that enable that success to happen. I mean, in most cases, organizations are exceptionally good at creating strategy. Where they fail or fall short is how they communicate the strategy. Are they able to build alignment, or do they build the right components to be able to measure progress and success? And so what we try to do there, and what I've done with a number of clients, is really help them be able to do that. As it relates to executive coaching, which I'm really passionate about and part of the business that I thoroughly enjoy, it's really helping each executive, and whether you're a CEO or a C-suite executive, to get better outcomes, build high-performing teams, and figure out like how you can have the greatest impact in influencing your organization. And even the smartest clients, have several clients who went to Ivy League schools, some who have no college education, but you have a great MBA, you can be exceptionally good at analytics, understanding the marketplace, understanding the changes that are needed, but you may not be connecting with your organization in a meaningful way, or you may not be inspiring your workforce in a more meaningful way. And so we talk through strategies individually for them to be able to do that. And so that's the part that I find incredibly rewarding, which is helping a leader really understand what's really well developed. So what are the things you do exceptionally well, but what are some of the things that are blind spots for you? And one of the common elements that I see in an organization is that it's lonely at the top. And so if you're running an organization, people are often going to tell you, what you want to hear, or they're going to deliver the message in a way that may not be as direct or as constructive as they would be if they were talking to a colleague or a friend. And so how do we create an environment that nurtures that and allows them to have access to the right information so they can make better decisions?
Yeah, you touched on a lot there, and I think I've in the past heard some folks say, "Why would an executive, why would a CEO need a coach or someone to provide them with I can't remember the word that was used. It wasn't mentorship, but I was like, it's lonely at the top, man. Like I just as an owner of a SMB, right? Like I know that it can be there's lonely days. And I can only imagine with larger enterprises, if you're at the top, and to your point, exactly right. A lot of people are surrounding that person, him or her, telling them what they want to hear, not maybe what they need to hear or what they truly believe. And so just to have almost like that sounding board of someone who has been there and been in the executive level, and been in large organizations. And now that can share insight and experiences across, other executives at other organizations. Probably is a huge boon for them.
Yeah, I'm smiling because it's very true. And if you think about it as executives, right? I mean, there's just a lot coming at us. You're living in a complex world with a lot of change and you're trying to move quickly. And some of us are more adept at moving quickly, right? And so the importance of slowing down, right? I mean, asking for feedback. You're getting access to the right information at the time you need it to make the best decision you can. And so how do you cultivate and create an environment that allows you to do that? I mean, most executives that I know, whether you're in an SMB or in a large corporation, are moving 100 miles an hour. And so, are you slowing down and having meaningful conversations, right? Are you checking in to ensure that people feel a sense of empowerment to be able to go out and deliver on what you want and expect from them? I mean, you're hiring these highly talented, capable people, but yet you're getting suboptimal results. Or even if you're getting good results, how can you get even better results, right? And to me, that's the part that I genuinely like. I mean, a good example that we often talk about with clients about is like, having an optimistic stance, right? So even when you're seeing problems in an organization or someone underperforms, try to better understand what are the dynamics that contributed to that particular situation and how might you have entered the situation sooner, or how might you have influenced that particular decision or outcome. And I think that's an important part of it, right? I mean, for most of us, we believe that being competent in an organization is being able to go out and do what you need to do and delivering great results. But a lot of it's also about collaboration. And it's also about teaching, coaching, guiding, influencing folks in the organization. And so helping leaders understand how they're showing up is a very important part of their work. I mean, and I'll give you a perfect example. One of the things that I do when I'm working with a client is I will interview the direct reports, and a couple of simple questions that I try to gather data for. One is like, what do they do exceptionally well, right? What's their success formula? What are some things that they need to work on? What are some things that they need to know or that you'd like to tell them but you don't feel comfortable sharing with them? And you'd be amazed at how open and willing people are. And even in instances where they say, like, I'm extremely open with my boss, invariably there are themes or things that are potentially getting in the way of that. And so we talk about it and we strategize on it, and then we develop a path to go forward. And invariably at the end of those engagements, right, they are better leaders, they are better respected, and they're delivering better results.
Speaking of delivering results, one of the questions I usually, get to, which we kind of switch gears to here is the challenges that surrounding, growth, right? Like, and you kind of mentioned something earlier in terms of no employee shows up trying to do a suboptimal, job. And as leaders in business world, whether you're an SMB or an executive, we're all trying to grow our respective firms under our leadership. And I kind of ask you, what are some of the challenges, not only that I think I'm going to switch gears in this, because typically I'll ask the folks that come on what are the challenges they face in growing their firm, which you can obviously add to. But I'm curious too, just because you are working directly with these executives, like what are the challenges that they're facing, both internally and externally, with regards to growth? Because that's kind of one of their driving initiatives, right? No one hires a CEO to minimize shareholder value, right? It's to come in there and grow the firm and maximize shareholder value. And so I'm kind of curious as just to get your take on that.
Yeah. I would say a couple of critical themes that I see. One is time, right? I mean, time is a very precious resource. And one of the mistakes a lot of executives make is that they just try to do so much in a limited amount of time that their team isn't necessarily aligned, or, they're frankly running from meeting to meeting. So they're not meaningfully having the important conversation that they need to be having. And so truly, more often than not, is getting executives to slow down, right? I mean, one of the key success factors for most executives is that they're able to be decisive, move quickly, and tackle a lot of things. Well, that can be a superpower, but if you overutilize it and you're not having those conversations or finding out, what parts of the organization are underperforming or potentially what are going to be the limiting factors, that's a big part of it. So one, how they manage their time. The second one is, not truly empowering their team. And it seems simple because we always say, many of us will say like we empower our team, but it really becomes this question of, do you give people time and space and support, right? And so do you ask them the question, like, what do you need from me, right? Do you believe you can deliver that? And if so, like, how can I support you? I mean, it's really asking those questions and having a deeper level of understanding so that people feel empowered that they can go out and do their best work. And the third thing that I think, and this happens in many teams, it's really having kind of open and honest communication. There are a number of leaders, and I'll give you one in particular, where they're so highly driven, and they want to move, quickly to deliver results. And they frankly could do any of the roles of the members of their team, but their standards are so high and the demands are so constant that folks on the team don't necessarily feel that this leader listens, cares about them, or is invested in their development and future. And so there's a massive disconnect in that particular situation. And so getting this leader to understand, like, there's a better way to achieve your outcome. So you want to both be strategic, but you also want to have intimate relationships with members of your team. And finding that balance becomes a critical factor in being able to do that. Again, as I said earlier, it's not a lack of the ability to develop a compelling strategy. It's more in how you communicate it. Do you build alignment? And do people fundamentally understand how best to support you and to support the business?
Who do you think some of the best leaders that you've seen? This is kind of an off the cuff one. Both maybe historically and today that operate at the executive level, that kind of embody a lot of the same characteristics that you just talked about. Give me a short list.
Yeah. The short list would be one, like, do you create an environment of psychological trust? Right? I mean, when we work for people that we trust, we can virtually say anything, even the difficult things, and they hear it, process it, and then you are able to figure out better solutions. So building, an environment, a high level of trust, that's one. The second is they're curious. They ask really good questions to understand, what's getting in the way or what's needed. And in that conversation, when someone asks you really good questions, kind of you often like step back, you think about it, right? And you give them a very thoughtful, logical answer. You're not trying to tell the person what they want to hear, but you're really trying to have a conversation. That's an important component of it. I think the third is that they're able to inspire and influence people, right? So it's not so much command and control. And there are parts of my career, at times in my career, where I was highly driven and I was telling people what they needed to go do and setting potentially unreasonable expectations. And folks on my team, thankfully, approached me and said, "Hey, like, we're trying to do too much. Like, we need to slow down. We need to focus." And so that's an important part, right? Being able to influence and inspire members of the team. And then I think that one of the fourth one that I'll say, since we're working on a short list, but it's the ability to celebrate and recognize success, right? I mean, sometimes we're so driven, so focused on what's next, what's next, what's next, that we don't spend enough time celebrating and recognizing the positive contributions of folks. And when you do that, people are engaged. They want to come to work. And I'll give you this small example that I often give executives, is that, look, if people on your team are waking up every morning excited to come to work and want to do a great job and want to be able to both please their customers and do what's best for the organization, then that's a really good sign that you're winning. If folks are coming to work nervous about, what does my leader think of me? Do they think I'm doing a good job? They've been so critical lately. I wonder if I'm in trouble. And this happens more often. And you'd be, you'd be surprised by it perhaps. But, I work with senior level executives and they're constantly worrying about what does their CEO think about their performance, and am I in trouble, or I didn't do so well on the last project. And so they're really more worried about themselves internally, often when they shouldn't and don't need to be. But if you can remove that environment just to get folks to want to come to work on your team and be excited and motivated and inspired, you're going to get far better outcomes.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, one of the things I've learned, even just in our small business firm, we've got 14 employees around the world, and we on Fridays, every other Friday, do a wins meeting, and to tackle exactly that, right? Just to basically give people opportunity to talk about the wins of the week, to enjoy and celebrate the wins that their peers, that other people in operations have or sales have. And that's been pretty cool. And I at first, when it was suggested to me, I was like, that sounds kind of like self-grandizing. But it's been really cool to see everyone kind of galvanize around it and really enjoy those hearing about other wins from across the departments.
That's awesome. And what it made me think of immediately is, like, we all are raised with a certain set of values, right? And so if you were raised by your parents or in a culture where talking about yourself or celebrating things feels like you're bragging, right? You're discouraged from doing that. But if you get into a rhythm of just being able to truly and legitimately celebrate good work, or when people do something that is exceptional or is a meaningful accomplishment, and you spend some time recognizing them for it, that's a huge motivator. And even what initially feels uncomfortable because you're introducing a change into the system, all of a sudden people get excited. They want to share with you what they're doing really well. And then that just generates more excitement and momentum. And so it's wonderful that you've been able to institute it. I think the key is to do it in a meaningful way, right? Sometimes we even have celebrations in some of my client systems, and it's like, oh, Terence did a great job. Hey, thanks, Terence, and then you quickly move on. But if you're able to say like, hey, Terence, I was really impressed with what you did with this particular customer, and I want to share with the group because I'm really proud of you, and I really appreciate the fact that you showed some resiliency, you worked through some challenges, you were able to win a large customer, and it really has a huge impact on the business. So thank you. Right. So doing it in a meaningful way becomes a very valuable and important element and aspect of high performing teams.
Yeah, I almost felt pretty good when you were saying that. I was like, wow, John, thanks. Like, I appreciate
Nice
that.
job.
One of the coming trends obviously is AI, and it's affecting conversations. I don't know how it's going to. I don't think anyone does quite yet how it's going to affect the people part of our organizations and our firms. But you are a big people person, and I'd like to try and get your feedback as the conversations that executives you work with. What are the conversations they have revolving around AI, around efficiencies, around their people? Do they have the right workforce? Are they going to need to reallocate resources in other areas? I'm just really curious to get your take. I've been talking about this with pretty much everyone that I speak with on the podcast because I think it's so imperative. Otherwise, we'd be burying our head in the sand. It's kind of like back when you and I came into the business world and the internet came about, and just saying, "Hey, we're gonna keep doing everything in paper and not choose to ignore that." But I'd like to hear your take on both the conversations that are happening in these organizations as well as where you think things may go.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I have several coaching clients who are, lead IT organizations or lead cybersecurity for large public companies. I mean, to your point, it is kind of front and center. The initial part I see is like the genuine excitement about what's possible. I think just belief that having access to more data or being able to scrub data to be able to make better decisions or to use technology to engage with customers in a different and more meaningful way, where that's freeing people up to focus on high value customers or customers that are really struggling with particular issues or responding sooner to things, right? They see the technology and AI as a huge enabler for them. I think we're still early in the journey. I mean, there's different varying opinions as to what the ROI is for the investment, but certainly people are excited, and just based on what I see, I mean, I'm genuinely excited to see what's possible, particularly on the component of being able to enable people to do better work and giving us more time, which is something that we all wrestle with. I mean, I think some of the concerns largely are: is this going to replace a lot of the folks in organizations, or how's this going to adversely impact me, or how am I going to respond or leverage the technology as part of my role? And so there's folks who are legitimately concerned and have some level of anxiety, and I think that part is yet to be determined. The advice that I typically give clients is like, be open and honest about what your strategy is or how you intend to use AI. Like, what's the goal? Right? How is it? What's in it for them or for the employees, and how is it going to benefit them? And how it's going to help your organization be better, right? I mean, if you step back for a minute from the I conversation, but this is an important element of it, is unemployment's like 3%, right? Organizations are struggling in many ways to still fill important or critical positions. And so if technology can be an enabler of that and help the organization perform at a high level, then it certainly can be a benefit. But you have to be very conscientious and thoughtful about what's the impact to your employees, and either provide people with necessary training or provide them with skills that enables them to still contribute and add value to your organization. And I think that's probably where the highest level of anxiety is for people. And I think it's yet to play out. But personally, I'm excited about it. I mean, I've always been a proponent of technology, and now the key is you got to use it effectively and thoughtfully. And I know there's some concerns on the part of some, like how will the data be used, and I think it's a legitimate concern. But I'm one of those folks who's optimistic. I think I try to bring optimism to any client engagement, and so I'm excited about it.
I am as well, and I think most of the people I talk to are excited about it, and really not from the standpoint of people replacement, but more of a people optimization, right? Giving our people the tools that they want and need to do a better job, to deliver better results for their clients. That is a resounding thread that's carrying through, and it's encouraging, right? Because it's like, okay, it's nothing. It's just like anything, right? It's nothing to be afraid of. Embrace it, and let's figure out how we can. Humans are wonderfully resourceful, and we find ways to make things better. So hopefully, we'll do the same with AI.
Yeah. And I'll give you a good example of linking to my work, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that you can use technology to get access to all kinds of information, theories, models, best practices. And I think in many ways that can be very useful, but it doesn't replace the value of an intimate relationship, right? And the human component of having and building meaningful connections, like building trust, helping clients, explore their blind spots, come to better decisions and conclusions. And so while the data is there and it's valuable and it can be very useful in many ways or instances, it's still static. Right? It's hard to replace the value of a meaningful human connection. And that's the part I'm still excited about.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the next question I was going to transition to is asking you, what you enjoy most about what you do in both professionally and maybe in your personal life. But I can already probably tell, the answer is even what you finished of is kind of building those personal and meaningful relationships and kind of helping people do the same. That comes through, but I'm still going to let you answer the question in your words and not just make an assumption. So, what is it that you enjoy the most, in the professional part of what you do, and obviously I wanted to know more of what you enjoy also outside of work.
Yeah, the most rewarding part of my work, honestly, is just having a meaningful connection with people that I work with. Certainly with clients, and having that level of trust where they can say anything. I mean, one of the things that's really hard for leaders is to be vulnerable. And so when you're in a coaching client relationship and a leader can talk about what's not going well with their family or their kids, or the business, or what their true legitimate fears are, which we don't often share publicly, right? But to be vulnerable and to be able to legitimately hear, right, what they're struggling or wrestling with, and to just be a good sounding board to ask really good questions. I mean, certainly I've been an executive. I was a chief people officer for two different public companies, and what I found most rewarding was the ability to be able to help people get to better outcomes, right? To show up better, to show up differently, to be authentic, and to have that level of reward. And we talked a little bit earlier about folks who are coming nearing the end of their careers and they're retiring, and invariably the one comment that comes back for CEOs who are about to sunset or about to do something different, it's about the value of the relationships that they've built, the impact that they've had, and my ability to be able to do that and to be able to help clients be able to get some of those answers, or be able to figure out what are some of their good habits and maybe some of their less desirable ones, and to be able to shift, is the part that I find most rewarding. Because in the end, it's clients will pay me because they want to get to a desired outcome, and so it's the ability to be able through those conversations to be able to do that.
Yep. Well, you're not going to escape. So what are the things that you enjoy doing outside of the professional work that you do?
Yeah, I love spending time with my family, my wife and my kids, but I enjoy coaching young kids and mentoring young professionals. I just see the amount of energy and excitement that they have, about whatever opportunities they're exploring. So be able to advise them. I try to get out as much as I can. So I like to run, I do yoga, I play golf. I'll just say in a quick moment, I played in a PGA Pro-Am this past weekend in Pebble Beach, and my partner and I came in first place, and so that was pretty exciting. And
That's impressive.
it was awesome. It's a great experience. But what made the experience so meaningful is like, playing with my partner, right? Like trusting each other, listening to each other. You think you should hit a 6-iron here? I don't know. I think maybe you should hit this club. Really? Oh, okay. All right, let's go for it. We're in this thing together, right? And so, achieving an outcome that I was able to share with my partner, and having just the experience to be alongside, the best players in the world who are playing golf, and to watch them how they do their thing, and to, I mean, for me personally, watching someone who's exceptionally good at anything, I just find it incredibly rewarding. And the last piece I'll say, this was the most impressive part of the weekend. I played golf with this 17-year-old young woman, and for those who know golf, she shot a 65, which was better than most professionals. But to watch her do it and just to stay positive and hit a couple bad shots and recover from that and stay focused, and then to just be as humble as she was. I mean, my partner and I were both like in awe of her, and she was just the most calm and composed 17-year-old I've seen. Where she's like, "Oh, that's great. Well, thank you," and to the point where she was even complimenting us on our shots, right? So the reality is, great leaders, she's going to be a fantastic leader. Just know how to behave and how to conduct themselves, and make other people feel better. And she did that for us. I mean, we were like in awe of her. And here's this, young future PGA player just giving us pointers and just being very thoughtful about how she was engaging with us. And it was just so impressive to see.
Wow, I can tell you that is impressive to shoot a 65 at Pebble. I don't care who you are, let alone a 17-year-old. That's amazing.
It was incredible. It was unbelievable. I was so impressed, and right, and it just speaks a little bit to being in the moment and enjoying things. And that's the other thing I try to enjoy is like being present. Focus on whoever I'm with and enjoying and making the most of it. And found that kind of helps me stay grounded and stay positive.
Well, look, as we wrap up here, what are ways? think what the best ways to ask is, what are ways that a client or a prospect could take that could start their journey with you, right? Because there's probably a number of different ways, whether it's an executive or SMB, depending on different parts of your firm. But what's typical? I hate using the word typical. But what's a good path that someone could take in terms of their journey to working with you?
Yeah, I mean, just reach out to me directly. I enjoy having conversations and getting to learn more about what people are thinking about. And so you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or at vegasconsultinggroup.com. And let's just have a conversation, right? I mean, I'm happy to give free advice. As many folks I've talked to, I was like, you don't really need my help. Here's some thoughts, right? Think about the following, or here's some things that you may want to incorporate or leverage. And at the end of the day, I want to do meaningful work with clients who are committed and really wanting to show up better or differently, or are wrestling with a particular issue. But let's just have a conversation. And if it leads to an engagement, great. And if it doesn't, then you have another colleague and friend.
Yeah. Well, I'll make sure and put the links down there so people can click on them and follow you and both get in contact with you. But I've enjoyed our meaningful conversation. It resonates through. You're a very authentic person, and I've appreciated the conversation. I'd love to have another one with you again.
Anytime, please reach out. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, obviously it's wonderful to have a conversation with you, but love your questions and really enjoyed our time together. So thank you.
I appreciate it, John. We'll look forward to having you next time.
Awesome. Take care. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great week.
Thanks, you too.